Published, 8:44 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, the 3rd of May 2018. Updated, 9:10 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, the 3rd of May 2018. Bok Soon Song, 72, tried to take advantage of dying John Williams when she turned up to his hospital with a registrar and attempted to marry the 66-year-old. A London court heard a dead millionaire's daughter is locked in a bitter legal battle over her father's fortune with a domestic servant, who is accused of trying to marry the elderly man on his deathbed. Former waitress Bok Soon Song, 72, tried to take advantage of dying John Williams when she turned up to his hospital with a registrar and attempted to marry the 66-year-old, a London court heard. Ms. Song then staked her claim at his £1 million Kensal Rise home by changing the locks, and tried to collect £500,000 from his fortune after the engineer died in 2016. It was said, the South Korean immigrant, who came to the UK in the 1980s and speaks little English, said she wasn't just Mr. Williams' housekeeper, but also his lover, and wasn't added to his will before he died. But Mr. Williams' daughter Deborah John Woodruff, 47, has blasted Ms. Song's claims, saying she is nothing more than a live-in housekeeper who took advantage of her dying father. Ms. Song is suing Mr. Williams' estate as well as his 3 children, claiming she should be granted reasonable provision from his fortune as his cohabiting partner of many years. Mrs. John Woodruff said the former waitress tried to tie the knot with her father while he was in hospital, only for the ill pensioner to send her and the registrar packing. Ms. Song claims to have effectively been Mr. Williams' wife, but Mrs. John Woodruff disputes her claim and is trying to have her thrown out of her father's 4-bedroom home. Representing the daughter, Barrister Barry Coulter said Ms. Song had sought to marry Mr. Williams as he lay gravely ill in hospital, going as far as calling in a registrar to perform the ceremony. Mrs. John Woodruff's case is that no part in this was played by the deceased, and, when the wedding party arrived, he sent them on their way, he told Judge Mark Knight. He questioned how, speaking very little English, Ms. Song could have ever understood something so complex as a proposal of marriage. Mr. Williams' daughter Deborah John Woodruff said Ms. Song is nothing more than a live-in housekeeper who took advantage of her dying father. Pictured, the father and daughter. Ms. Song then staked her claim at his £1 million Kensal Rise, pictured, home by changing the locks and tried to collect £500,000 from his fortune after the engineer died. In 2016, it was said through an interpreter. Ms. Song told the court Mr. Williams proposed to her using simple words and gestures, and by pointing at words in a Korean English phrase book. But when the marriage was due to take place in the hospital, he decided to postpone it and sent the registrar away, she said. The court heard Ms. Song moved to the UK from South Korea in 1983 and worked as a waitress and later as a restaurant manager. She met Mr. Williams, a Korean food lover and engineer, in the early 1990s through mutual friends and began a long-term relationship with him, she claims. Ms. Song's barrister, Paul Infield, told Central London County Court that the pair lived together at Ms. Song's flat and then at the disputed house on Chamberlain Road. However, the 66-year-old died without making a valid will, and so his fortune would normally be split between his 3 children, Mrs. John Woodruff and her brothers, David and Andrew Williams. As the wedding never went ahead, Ms. Song would get nothing and be left homeless and destitute unless granted a share by the court. Mr. Infield said, they slept in the same bed until he became ill, had sexual relations and were effectively a couple, Mr. Infield said. Mr. Williams went as far as calling his bank to get them to change her name on documents to Mrs. Song Bok Williams, Ms. Song's lawyer claimed. Through an interpreter, Ms. Song told the court Mr. Williams proposed to her using simple words and gestures, and by pointing at words in a Korean English phrase book. Pictured, Mr. Williams and his daughter. The elderly man had referred to her as his wife, said the barrister, pointing to a birthday card addressed to "My wonderful wife from the man who loves you more than words can say." Those are not cards sent by an employer to his housekeeper, he told Judge Knight. Giving evidence through a Korean interpreter, Ms. Song insisted that she and Mr. Williams had been a loving couple, whether he was sick or not. We shared our bedroom, she told the judge. Even when he was so sick I couldn't lie next to him, I made sure I was with him in the same room, making my bed on the floor next to his bed because he didn't like to be alone. She admitted that she can't speak much English, but said she and Mr. Williams could understand each other because they had been together so long. Mrs. John Woodruff's attorney said Ms. Song should get nothing from the state and be evicted from the house. There was no evidence she was anything other than a housekeeper, who cooked and cleaned and dealt with lodgers at the Chamberlain Road house, said the attorney. In the days before he died, Mr. Williams had instructed a solicitor to grant his daughter control of his finances, in order to frustrate Ms. Song and her friends from obtaining the deceased's money, the barrister claimed. pictured Deborah John Woodruff as she did not attend the funeral and, whilst the funeral service at a local church was well attended by a large number of his relatives, friends, work colleagues and neighbors, no one remarked on the absence of his supposed partner of over 20 years, he said. In the days before he died, Mr. Williams had instructed a solicitor to grant his daughter control of his finances, in order to frustrate Miss Song and her friends from obtaining the deceased's money. The barrister claimed the evidence, coming as it does from the deceased himself, albeit as a hearsay record, is a telling blow to Miss Song's suggestion that, up until his death, the deceased was in a loving relationship, akin to that of man and wife, with her, he said. Rather, she was a long-time housekeeper, seeking to take advantage of a dying man. Miss Song's attorney argued, said the only reason she had not been at the funeral was because she was not told the date and place where it was to take place, much to her distress. Although Miss Song is suing all three siblings, only Mrs. John Woodruff is represented by lawyers and she is the one party seeking Miss Song's removal from the property. The hearing continues.